Chapter 1. Snowflakes in the air. The first snow of the season began to fall softly on the small town, each flake drifting lazily from the sky, painting the streets and rooftops in a blanket of pure white. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of Christmas. The town square was adorned with festive decorations, twinkling lights, and garlands that stretched from one lamp post to the next, creating a scene that could have been plucked straight from a holiday postcard. Chris stood at the window of his small, cozy apartment, watching as the snowflakes danced in the air. The glow from the streetlights outside reflected off the snow, casting a warm, golden hue across the room. Chris had always loved the first snow of the year. It brought with it a sense of peace and a reminder of the simple joys in life. He ran a hand through his tousled brown hair, his breath fogging the glass as he leaned closer to the window, lost in thought. Down the street, Carole was walking home, her boots crunching softly in the fresh snow. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, her breath forming little clouds in the frosty air. Carole had just finished decorating the Christmas tree in her family's living room, a tradition she cherished every year. The tree was a masterpiece, adorned with ornaments that had been passed down through generations, each one holding a special memory. As she walked, Carole's mind wandered to the memories of Christmases past, each one filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of family. As she reached the corner of the street, Carole paused, taking in the sight of the snow-covered town square. The large Christmas tree in the center was lit up, its lights twinkling like stars against the night sky. She smiled to herself, feeling the familiar excitement of the holiday season. There was something magical about this time of year, something that made everything seem possible. Chris decided to step outside, drawn by the beauty of the night and the promise of fresh snow underfoot. He grabbed his coat and scarf, wrapping up against the chill, and made his way down the stairs and out into the street. The cold air hit him as soon as he stepped outside, but he welcomed it, relishing the sharp contrast to the warmth of his apartment. He started to walk, his footsteps muffled by the snow, heading toward the town square. As Chris approached the square, he noticed a figure standing by the large Christmas tree. The person seemed to be admiring the lights, lost in the same sense of wonder that had drawn Chris outside. As he got closer, he recognized Carole. He had seen her around town before, but they had never spoken. There was something about her that intrigued him, something that made him want to know more. Carole turned slightly, sensing someone approaching, and saw Chris walking toward her. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a small, friendly smile. Chris returned the smile, feeling a strange but pleasant warmth spread through him, despite the cold. They both stood there in silence, taking in the beauty of the tree, the snow, and the quiet peace of the night. The town was hushed, the usual bustle of life muted by the thick layer of snow that blanketed everything. The only sounds were the faint jingling of distant bells and the occasional gust of wind that sent flurries of snow swirling through the air. Chris and Carole didn't speak, but there was no need to. The moment was perfect in its simplicity. The snow continued to fall, soft and steady, as if the world had slowed down just for them. They both knew this night would be one to remember, a night where something unspoken passed between them, a connection that, while subtle, was undeniably real. Eventually, Chris turned to leave, giving Carole one last look. Their eyes met again, and in that brief moment, there was a silent understanding, a promise that this was just the beginning. Carole watched as Chris walked away, feeling a flutter of anticipation in her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but she had a feeling that this Christmas would be different, special in a way she couldn't yet describe. With a final glance at the glowing tree, Carole turned and headed home, her mind filled with thoughts of the stranger she had met in the snow. The snowflakes continued to fall, covering the footprints they had left behind, as if to seal the memory of that moment in time. And so, the first chapter of their story began, under the gentle snowfall of a quiet December night, with the promise of Christmas in the air. Chapter 2. A Chance Encounter. The morning after the first snowfall dawned with a soft glow, as the sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a golden light across the snow-covered town. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional sound of shovels clearing paths or the distant rumble of a car engine starting up. It was a Saturday, a day when the town moved at a more leisurely pace, allowing its residents to savor the quiet beauty of the winter morning. Carole woke early, feeling unusually energized by the events of the previous night. The memory of the Christmas tree, the snow, and the brief encounter with Chris lingered in her mind, filling her with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. She decided to take a walk to clear her thoughts, eager to breathe in the crisp morning air and see the town dressed in its winter finery. She dressed warmly in a thick coat, a knitted hat, and gloves before stepping outside. The cold air greeted her as she closed the door behind her, and she paused for a moment, taking in the peaceful scene before her. The snow from the night before had settled evenly, creating a pristine white canvas that covered the streets and rooftops. Icicles hung from the eaves of houses, catching the sunlight and sparkling like diamonds. Carole began her walk, her boots leaving fresh prints in the untouched snow. As she moved through the streets, she noticed that many of the town's residents had begun to decorate their homes for Christmas. Wreaths adorned front doors, and strings of lights were being hung along porches and windowsills. The town was slowly transforming into a festive wonderland, and Carole couldn't help but smile at the sight. As she reached the town square, the large Christmas tree once again caught her eye. In the daylight, it was just as beautiful as it had been the night before, its branches heavy with snow and decorations. Carole walked closer, taking a moment to admire the intricate ornaments that adorned the tree, each one carefully chosen and placed with love. Meanwhile, Chris was also out for a morning walk. The beauty of the snow-covered town had drawn him outside once more, and he found himself heading toward the square, as if something unseen was guiding him there. He had thought about Carole often since their brief encounter the previous night, curious about the woman who had captured his attention so effortlessly. He hadn't expected to see her again so soon, but as he approached the square, he noticed her standing by the Christmas tree, just as she had been the night before. Chris paused for a moment, observing her from a distance. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes focused on the tree's decorations. There was something peaceful about her presence, something that drew him in. Without really thinking, Chris continued walking, his footsteps crunching softly in the snow. Carole noticed him as he approached, a slight flutter of recognition stirring in her chest. She turned to face him, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other, neither one saying a word. It was as if the world had slowed down, and the only thing that mattered was this quiet connection between them. Chris offered a gentle smile, and Carole returned it, feeling a warmth spread through her despite the cold. There was no need for words. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with a mutual understanding that neither could quite explain. They stood there together for a while, just enjoying the moment, surrounded by the beauty of the snow-covered square and the towering Christmas tree. The town began to wake up around them, with people bustling about, running errands, and preparing for the day ahead. But Chris and Carole remained in their own little world, untouched by the rush of life around them. After a time, Chris glanced down the street and noticed a small cafe with a sign in the window advertising hot cocoa. The idea of a warm drink sounded appealing, and he gestured subtly toward the cafe, catching Carole's eye. She followed his gaze and nodded, understanding his unspoken suggestion. Together, they walked to the cafe, their footsteps in sync as they made their way across the square. The cafe was a cozy little place, with large windows that looked out onto the street and tables set up for people to relax and enjoy a warm drink. Inside, the air was filled with the rich scent of coffee and chocolate, mixed with the faint aroma of freshly baked pastries. Chris held the door open for Carole as they entered, and she gave him a grateful smile as she stepped inside. The warmth of the cafe enveloped them, a welcome contrast to the cold outside. They each ordered a cup of hot cocoa, and once they had their drinks in hand, They found a small table by the window where they could sit and watch the snow continue to fall. As they sat together, sipping their drinks, Chris and Carole exchanged the occasional glance, their eyes conveying what words could not. The hot cocoa warmed them from the inside out, and the quiet companionship they shared felt natural, as though they had known each other far longer than just a few hours. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding to the already thick blanket that covered the town. The world beyond the window seemed distant, a serene landscape of white that held no urgency or demands. For Chris and Carole, it was a moment of peace, a chance to simply be, without the need for conversation or explanation. As the morning wore on, the cafe began to fill with other patrons, each one seeking refuge from the cold. The noise level rose, with the sounds of chatter and laughter mingling with the clinking of cups and plates. But for Chris and Carole, time seemed to stand still. They remained in their quiet corner by the window, content to watch the world go by outside. Eventually, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a bright light over the town and causing the snow to glisten like 1,000 tiny diamonds. Chris finished his drink and set the empty cup down, his gaze shifting to Carole, who was still cradling her cup in her hands. She looked up at him, meeting his eyes with a soft, thoughtful expression. There was something unspoken between them, a connection that had formed in the quiet moments they had shared. Chris felt a sense of certainty, as if meeting Carole had been meant to happen, a twist of fate that had brought them together at just the right time. Carole seemed to feel it too. She set down her cup, her fingers lingering on the edge of the saucer for a moment before she looked out the window, watching as a fresh flurry of snowflakes began to fall. It was a gentle reminder that time was moving on, and that eventually they would have to leave the warmth of the cafe and return to the world outside. Chris knew this too. He rose from his seat, signaling that it was time to go. Carole followed his lead, and together they made their way to the door. As they stepped back out into the cold, the snowflakes danced around them, swirling in the air as if celebrating their presence. They walked side by side through the square, retracing their steps from earlier that morning. The town was busier now, with more people out and about, but Chris and Carole remained in their own quiet world, moving through the snow as if nothing else mattered. When they reached the point where their paths would diverge, they paused, turning to face each other once more. There was no need for words. The silence between them spoke volumes. Chris gave Carole a small, reassuring nod, and she returned it with a smile, her eyes filled with a warmth that mirrored his own. With that, they parted ways, each heading in a different direction. But as they walked away, both Chris and Carole knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something new, something unexpected and beautiful. The snow continued to fall, covering their tracks once more, as if to seal the memory of their chance encounter beneath a blanket of white. And though they were now apart, Chris and Carole both carried the warmth of that morning with them, a quiet promise of what was yet to come. Chapter 3: The Warmth of a Fireplace. The days that followed were a flurry of activity as the town prepared for the approaching holiday. Lights and decorations multiplied, adorning every corner, while the scent of pine, cinnamon, and freshly baked goods filled the air. People moved about with a sense of purpose, their spirits lifted by the festive season. Amidst the growing excitement, the world seemed to glow a little brighter, the chill of winter softened by the warmth of Christmas. Chris found himself thinking about Carole often. Their chance encounters had sparked something within him, a quiet yearning that he couldn't quite put into words. The memory of their time together lingered, filling his thoughts with a sense of anticipation. Each day, as he walked through the town, his eyes would wander, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He didn't know what he was searching for exactly, but he knew that being near her brought a sense of calm and contentment that he hadn't felt in a long time. Carole, too, found her thoughts drifting back to Chris. The quiet moments they had shared seemed to replay in her mind, each one leaving an indelible mark on her heart. There was something about him that drew her in, something that made her feel understood in a way she hadn't experienced before. It was as if they had known each other for much longer than just a few brief encounters. One evening, as a light snow began to fall once again, Carole decided to visit the local bookstore. It was one of her favorite places in town, a small, cozy shop tucked away on a quiet street. The store was filled with shelves of books, each one brimming with stories waiting to be discovered. It was a place where Carole could lose herself for hours, wrapped in the warmth of the words on the page. As she stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed softly, announcing her arrival. The warmth of the shop greeted her, along with the familiar scent of old paper and leather bindings. Carole removed her gloves and hat, tucking them into her coat pocket as she began to browse the shelves, her fingers lightly brushing over the spines of the books. Unbeknownst to her, Chris had also decided to visit the bookstore that evening. He had always enjoyed the quiet solace that the shop provided, a place where he could escape the world for a little while and immerse himself in the pages of a good book. When he entered, he was surprised to see Carole there, her figure bathed in the soft glow of the store's lamps. Chris hesitated for a moment, his heart skipping a beat at the sight of her. He watched as she moved gracefully between the shelves, her attention focused on the books before her. There was something peaceful about the way she carried herself, something that made him want to be near her. After a moment of hesitation, Chris made his way to the back of the store, where a large stone fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm light across the room. The fireplace was surrounded by a cluster of armchairs and a low wooden table, inviting visitors to sit and read. Chris selected a book from one of the nearby shelves and settled into one of the chairs, letting the warmth of the fire seep into his bones. Carole continued to browse, eventually selecting a novel that had caught her eye. She made her way to the back of the store, planning to find a quiet spot to read for a while. When she reached the area by the fireplace, she noticed Chris sitting there, a book in his hands. He looked up as she approached, and their eyes met, the recognition instant and mutual. Carole offered a small, shy smile, and Chris returned it with a nod. Without a word, Carole took a seat in one of the armchairs opposite him, the fire's warmth enveloping them both. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of turning pages. There was no need for conversation. Their presence alone was enough. As they sat there, the world outside seemed to fade away. The snow continued to fall, covering the town in a thick layer of white, but inside the bookstore, time stood still. The warmth of the fire, the soft glow of the lamps, and the quiet companionship between Chris and Carole created a cocoon of peace and contentment. Carole lost herself in her book, the words on the page weaving a story that captured her imagination. Every so often, she would glance up and catch sight of Chris, absorbed in his own book. There was something comforting about being in his presence, something that made her feel safe and at ease. Chris, too, found himself sneaking glances at Carole. He was drawn to her in a way he couldn't quite explain, as if some invisible thread connected them. The mere fact that she was there, sitting across from him, brought him a sense of calm that he hadn't known he needed. The evening wore on, the fire crackling softly as the snow continued to fall outside. The store remained quiet, with only a few other patrons browsing the shelves or settling into the armchairs scattered throughout the room. The atmosphere was serene, almost magical, as if the store itself was a refuge from the world outside. Eventually, Chris closed his book, setting it aside on the small table between them. He glanced at Carole, who was still immersed in her novel, her eyes moving steadily across the page. He didn't want to disturb her, but he knew it was getting late, and the store would soon be closing. Carole sensed his movement and looked up, meeting his gaze with a soft smile. She could tell that it was time to go, but she wasn't ready to leave the warmth of the moment they had shared. Reluctantly, she closed her book and placed it on the table beside his. They both rose from their chairs, the fire's warmth lingering on their skin as they gathered their coats and belongings. Chris gestured toward the door, indicating that they should leave together, and Carole nodded in agreement. They walked to the front of the store, where the owner was beginning to close up for the night. As they stepped outside, the cold air greeted them once again, a sharp contrast to the warmth they had just left behind. The snow had continued to fall, blanketing the town in a thick, soft layer that muffled the sounds of the night. The streets were quiet, the lights from the storefronts casting a gentle glow over the snow-covered ground. Chris and Carole walked side by side, their footsteps leaving a trail in the freshly fallen snow. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken connection that had grown stronger with each passing day. The warmth of the fire still lingered in their hearts, a reminder of the quiet moment they had shared. As they reached the point where their paths would diverge, Chris paused, turning to face Carole. He gave her a warm, reassuring smile, and she returned it with a look that held both gratitude and something more, something that hinted at the possibility of a deeper connection. Without a word, they parted ways, each heading home with the memory of the evening still fresh in their minds. The snow continued to fall, covering their tracks once more, as if to seal the memory of that moment beneath a blanket of white. And so, their story continued to unfold, one quiet moment at a time. As they moved through the winter season together, the warmth of the fireplace, the crackling of the fire, and the comfort of each other's presence had created a bond that neither could deny. A bond that would only grow stronger as Christmas drew nearer. Chapter 4. The Christmas Market. As the days passed, the excitement of Christmas grew ever more palpable in the small town. The townspeople were in full preparation mode, setting up stalls, hanging lights, and decorating every available surface with festive cheer. The heart of these preparations was the annual Christmas market, a beloved tradition that transformed the town square into a vibrant wonderland filled with the sights, sounds, and scents of the holiday season. Chris had always loved the Christmas market. It was a place where the community came together, where neighbors exchanged warm greetings and children ran about with faces flushed from the cold. This year, however, the market held a special significance for him. Ever since his encounters with Carole, Chris found himself looking forward to these moments with renewed anticipation. The market was not just a festive event. It was another opportunity to see her, to share in the simple joy of the season. On the morning of the market, Chris woke early, his breath fogging in the cold air as he stepped outside. The sky was a pale blue, tinged with the pink and orange hues of dawn. The snow from the previous days had been cleared from the main paths, but a fresh dusting overnight left everything looking pristine and untouched. Chris bundled up in his warmest clothes and headed toward the square, the crisp air invigorating him as he walked. When he arrived, the square was already bustling with activity. Vendors were setting up their stalls, each one a wooden structure adorned with garlands of pine and strings of twinkling lights. The scent of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider wafted through the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies and pastries. Children's laughter echoed through the square as they marveled at the various wares on display, from handmade ornaments to colorful scarves and hats. Chris wandered through the market, his eyes taking in the festive displays. He admired the craftsmanship of the handmade goods, pausing occasionally to purchase small trinkets and gifts. As he moved from stall to stall, his thoughts inevitably drifted to Carole. He wondered if she would be at the market today, and the thought filled him with a sense of eager anticipation. Carole had indeed planned to visit the market that day. Like Chris, she cherished the sense of community that the event brought, the way it seemed to bring out the best in everyone. The market was a place where she could lose herself in the festive atmosphere, where the worries of everyday life seemed to fade away, replaced by the warmth of the holiday spirit. Dressed in a wool coat, a knitted scarf, and a pair of fur-lined boots, Carole made her way to the square, her breath visible in the cold morning air. As she approached, she could see the market in full swing, the stalls aglow with lights and the square alive with the buzz of activity. A smile tugged at the corners of her lips as she entered the throng of people, her heart light with the joy of the season. Carole wandered through the market, her eyes alight with wonder as she took in the festive sights. She paused at a stall selling handmade ornaments, each one a unique work of art. As she carefully selected a few to take home, she felt a gentle brush against her arm. Turning, she saw Chris standing beside her, his eyes reflecting the same warmth she felt. For a moment, they simply stood there, the noise of the market fading into the background as they shared a quiet smile. It was as if the world around them had paused, leaving them in their own little bubble of peace. Chris gestured toward the stall, indicating the ornaments Carole was holding, and she nodded in agreement, her smile growing as she realized they had both chosen the same ones. Chris purchased the ornaments, handing them to Carole with a small, appreciative nod. She accepted them gratefully, her heart fluttering at the thoughtfulness of his gesture. They continued to walk through the market together, side by side, their footsteps in sync as they moved from stall to stall. As they wandered, they came across a booth offering hot mulled wine, the spicy scent drawing them in. Chris purchased 2 cups, handing one to Carole. The warmth of the drink spread through her, a welcome contrast to the chilly air. They found a quiet corner of the square where they could sit and enjoy their drinks, the festive chaos of the market swirling around them. From their vantage point, they could see the entire square, the twinkling lights reflecting off the snow, the stalls bustling with activity, and the giant Christmas tree standing tall in the center. It was a scene straight out of a holiday postcard, filled with warmth and cheer. Carole sipped her mulled wine, the rich flavors of cinnamon, cloves, and citrus filling her senses. She glanced over at Chris, who was gazing out at the market with a contented expression. There was a quiet understanding between them, a sense of connection that needed no words. They were simply happy to be in each other's company, sharing in the simple pleasures of the season. After a while, they rose from their seats and continued their exploration of the market. They passed by a group of carolers singing traditional Christmas songs, their voices filling the air with a melodic harmony that seemed to warm even the coldest of hearts. The sound of their singing followed Chris and Carole as they moved through the market, a soundtrack to the unfolding day. As the morning turned to afternoon, the market grew even busier, with more people arriving to take part in the festivities. Chris and Carole found themselves at a stall selling handmade candles, each one uniquely scented and beautifully packaged. Chris picked up a candle, inhaling the soothing scent of pine and eucalyptus, and handed it to Carole with a questioning look. She smiled and nodded, and Chris purchased the candle, adding it to the growing collection of items they had gathered throughout the day. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the square. The market took on a new glow as the lights became more pronounced, twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. The temperature dropped, and Chris noticed Carole shivering slightly despite her warm coat. Without hesitation, he reached out and adjusted the scarf around her neck, making sure it covered her more fully. Carole looked up at him with a grateful smile, touched by his small but caring gesture. As the day began to wind down, Chris and Carole found themselves back at the large Christmas tree in the center of the square. The tree was even more beautiful now, its lights twinkling brightly in the fading light. They stood together, taking in the sight, their hearts full of the joy and warmth that the day had brought. Chris reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. He handed it to Carole, his eyes reflecting the twinkling lights of the tree. Carole looked at the package in surprise, then back at Chris, her expression a mix of curiosity and gratitude. She unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a delicate snowflake ornament, its intricate design catching the light in the most enchanting way. Carole held the ornament up, admiring its beauty, and then looked at Chris with a smile that conveyed more than words ever could. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to her. Chris had thought of her, had chosen something special just for her, and in that moment, she felt a connection to him that went beyond the confines of their brief time together. With the snowflake ornament in her hand, Carole turned toward the tree and carefully hung it on one of the branches. The ornament caught the light, sparkling among the other decorations, a symbol of the day they had shared and the bond that was growing between them. As they stood there, the snow began to fall once more, gently dusting the square with a fresh layer of white. Chris and Carole didn't move, content to stand side by side, watching the world around them transform into a winter wonderland. The market continued to buzz with activity, the sounds of laughter and music filling the air. But for Chris and Carole, time seemed to stand still as they remained by the tree, their hearts intertwined by the quiet moments they had shared. The day was drawing to a close, but neither of them felt the need to rush home. They knew that this day would stay with them, a cherished memory that would warm their hearts long after the snow had melted and the decorations had been taken down. As the evening deepened and the lights of the market twinkled brighter against the night sky, Chris and Carole finally turned to leave. They walked through the snow-covered square, their footsteps the only sound as they made their way back through the now quiet streets of the town. And as they walked, they knew that the Christmas market had brought them something far more precious than gifts or decorations. It had given them each other, and that was the greatest gift of all. Chapter 5. The Snowy Stroll. The town was blanketed in a thick layer of snow, transforming it into a scene from a winter fairy tale. The snow had continued to fall steadily throughout the night, covering the rooftops, trees, and streets in a pristine white coat. The morning sun had risen, casting a soft golden glow over the landscape, and the entire town seemed to glisten under its warm light. There was a hushed stillness in the air, as if the world itself was taking a deep breath, savoring the peace that came with the snowfall. Chris awoke to the sight of snowflakes gently drifting past his window. The world outside was calm and serene, the kind of morning that invited long walks and quiet reflection. He dressed warmly, layering his clothes to ward off the chill, and stepped outside. The cold air was crisp and refreshing, filling his lungs as he took his first steps into the snow-covered streets. The town was quiet, with only a few people out and about, their footsteps muffled by the thick snow. The snow crunched under Chris's boots as he walked, each step leaving a distinct imprint in the otherwise untouched surface. The streets, usually bustling with activity, were now peaceful and still, with only the occasional sound of a distant car or the chirping of a bird breaking the silence. As he walked, Chris's thoughts drifted back to the Christmas market and the time he had spent with Carole. The memory of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, and the simple joy they had shared filled his heart with a quiet happiness. There was something special about their connection, something that had grown stronger with each encounter, and he found himself looking forward to seeing her again. Carole had also awoken to the beauty of the snowy morning. She loved the stillness that snow brought, the way it seemed to slow the world down and invite moments of quiet contemplation. After enjoying a hot cup of tea, she decided to take a walk, eager to experience the winter wonderland that had transformed the town overnight. Bundled up in her warmest coat, scarf, and hat, Carole stepped outside and into the snow-covered streets. The air was cold but invigorating, the kind of cold that made her feel alive and present in the moment. She began to walk, her boots making soft impressions in the fresh snow as she moved through the town. The world around her was enchanting, every tree branch heavy with snow, every rooftop dusted with white. The town's decorations, still twinkling from the previous night's festivities, added a magical touch to the already picturesque scene. Carole let herself be absorbed by the beauty of it all, her mind clear and her heart light. As fate would have it, Chris and Carole's paths soon converged. Their steps, guided by a shared love for the peacefulness of the snowy morning, brought them to a quiet park on the edge of town. The park was a favorite spot for both of them, a place where they could escape the hustle and bustle of daily life and find a moment of solitude. Today, the park was even more beautiful than usual, its trees and benches draped in a thick layer of snow, the paths winding through it like ribbons of white. Chris entered the park first, drawn by the tranquil beauty that lay within. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow, while the ground beneath them was an unbroken expanse of white. He walked slowly, taking in the scene, feeling as though he had stepped into another world, one where time moved differently and the worries of everyday life seemed distant and unimportant. Carole entered the park a short while later, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Chris up ahead. She had not expected to see him, but the sight of him filled her with a warmth that rivaled the hot tea she had sipped that morning. She paused for a moment, watching him as he walked, his figure a comforting presence against the backdrop of snow-covered trees. Chris sensed her presence before he saw her. Something about the stillness of the park, the way the snow seemed to amplify even the smallest sounds, alerted him to the fact that he was no longer alone. He turned slowly, his eyes searching the path behind him, and there she was, standing in the distance, a vision in the winter landscape. Their eyes met across the snow-covered ground, and for a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if the park, the snow, and the entire world had paused, holding its breath in anticipation. The connection between them was palpable, a silent understanding that needed no words. Chris smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and Carole responded with one of her own. Slowly, they began to walk toward each other, their footsteps leaving parallel tracks in the snow. The distance between them shrank with each step, and as they drew closer, The sense of peace and contentment that had filled their hearts at the Christmas market returned, stronger than before. When they finally reached each other, they stood in silence, taking in the beauty of the moment. The park was a winter wonderland, the trees above them creating a canopy of white, while the snow on the ground sparkled in the morning light. The air was crisp and clear, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and the promise of more snow to come. Chris gestured toward the path that wound deeper into the park, and Carole nodded in agreement. They began to walk together, their steps in sync as they moved through the snow-covered landscape. There was no need for words. Their presence beside each other was enough, a silent affirmation of the bond that had grown between them. The path led them to a small, frozen pond in the center of the park. The surface of the pond was smooth and glassy, reflecting the sky above and the trees that surrounded it. Chris and Carole paused at the edge of the pond, taking in the serene beauty of the scene. The world seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. Chris reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small stone, smooth and round. He turned it over in his hand, feeling its weight, before carefully skipping it across the surface of the pond. The stone skimmed across the ice, leaving a series of gentle ripples in its wake before coming to rest at the far edge. Carole watched, a soft smile on her lips, as Chris turned to her with a look of quiet satisfaction. They stood there for a while, enjoying the stillness of the park and the beauty of the winter morning. The sun had risen higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow, and the air was filled with a golden light that made the snow sparkle like diamonds. The scene was almost magical, a perfect moment captured in time. Eventually, they began to walk again, following the path as it wound through the park and back toward the town. The snow continued to crunch softly under their boots, the only sound in the otherwise silent world. As they walked, Chris reached out and gently took Carole's hand in his. She looked up at him in surprise, but then her expression softened, and she squeezed his hand in return. The simple act of holding hands felt natural, as if it was something they had been meant to do all along. Their fingers interlaced, they walked in companionable silence, their hearts beating in unison. The connection between them, which had begun with chance encounters and quiet moments, had grown into something strong and undeniable. As they left the park and returned to the town, the world seemed to come alive once more. The streets were beginning to fill with people going about their day, their voices and laughter echoing off the snow-covered buildings. The town's decorations, twinkling in the daylight, added a festive touch to the scene, a reminder that Christmas was just around the corner. Chris and Carole walked side by side, their hands still clasped together as they made their way through the town. The snow had started to fall again, gently dusting their hair and shoulders with a fine layer of white. The town square was bustling with activity, with children playing in the snow and vendors setting up their stalls for another day at the market. As they reached the center of town, Chris and Carole reluctantly released each other's hands, knowing that it was time to part ways for now. But there was no sadness in their parting, only the quiet knowledge that they would see each other again soon. The bond between them had been strengthened by their shared moments, and they both knew that their story was far from over. With a final smile and a nod, they turned and walked in opposite directions, each carrying with them the warmth of the morning they had spent together. The snow continued to fall, covering their tracks as they moved through the town, leaving behind a blank canvas for the next chapter of their story. And as they walked, their hearts light and their spirits high, Chris and Carole knew that this Christmas would be one they would never forget. The snowfall, the quiet stroll, the simple act of holding hands, all of it had brought them closer together, weaving their lives into a shared story that was only just beginning. Chapter 6. The Christmas Tree. The town's excitement grew with each passing day as Christmas approached. Every home and shop window was adorned with twinkling lights, garlands, and ornaments, creating a festive atmosphere that warmed the hearts of everyone who passed by. The air was filled with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and freshly baked goods, making it impossible not to feel the spirit of the season. Chris had spent the morning at work, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The memory of the snowy stroll with Carole lingered in his mind, filling him with a quiet joy that stayed with him throughout the day. As he finished his tasks and prepared to head home, he decided to take a detour through the town square, where the Christmas tree lot was set up. The tree lot was a magical place, filled with the scent of pine and the sight of countless evergreens standing tall, their branches heavy with snow. The lot was busy with families selecting the perfect tree for their homes, children running excitedly between the rows, and vendors helping customers tie their chosen trees to their cars. The air was alive with the sounds of laughter and the crunch of boots on snow, creating a warm and joyful atmosphere. Chris walked slowly through the lot, taking in the sight of the trees, each one beautiful in its own way. He wasn't sure what had drawn him there, but as he wandered between the rows of evergreens, he found himself thinking about how special it would be to have a tree of his own this year. It had been a long time since he had put up a Christmas tree, and the thought of decorating one, especially with Carole in mind, filled him with a sense of anticipation. As Chris walked among the trees, he spotted one that caught his eye. It wasn't the tallest or the fullest tree in the lot, but there was something about its shape, the way its branches seemed to reach out invitingly, that made it stand out to him. He stepped closer, examining the tree from all angles, and knew instantly that this was the one. Chris purchased the tree, and with the help of one of the vendors, secured it to the roof of his car. The drive home was filled with a sense of excitement, the tree swaying slightly with each turn as if it too was eager to be taken to its new home. When Chris arrived, he carefully carried the tree inside, the fresh scent of pine filling his living room as he set it up in the corner by the window. Once the tree was standing tall and secure, Chris took a moment to admire it. The bare branches were beautiful in their simplicity, but he knew that the real magic would come once it was decorated. He retrieved a box of ornaments from a closet, a collection that had been passed down to him by his parents, each piece holding memories of Christmases past. Chris began by stringing lights around the tree, weaving them carefully between the branches so that they would illuminate the tree from within. The soft glow of the lights brought the tree to life, casting a warm, golden light across the room. Next, he began to hang the ornaments, each one carefully placed on a branch, adding color and sparkle to the tree. As he worked, Chris's thoughts kept drifting back to Carole. He imagined her standing beside him, helping to hang the ornaments, her face lit up with the same joy that he felt. The idea of sharing this moment with her, of creating new memories together, filled him with a deep sense of happiness. Meanwhile, across town, Carole was also busy preparing for Christmas. She had spent the afternoon decorating her own home, stringing lights around the windows and hanging a wreath on the front door. But as she finished her tasks, she found herself thinking about Chris, wondering what he was doing and if he was feeling the same anticipation for the holiday as she was. Carole decided to take a walk to clear her mind. The evening was cold but clear, with the stars twinkling overhead and the snow crunching softly underfoot. She walked through the quiet streets, admiring the decorations on the houses she passed, the sight of twinkling lights and glowing candles filling her with a sense of peace. As she walked, Carole found herself heading in the direction of Chris's home, almost without realizing it. The thought of seeing him, even if just for a moment, made her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't sure what she would say or do if she saw him, but she knew that being near him would bring her comfort. When Carole arrived at Chris's house, she paused outside, her breath visible in the cold night air. She could see the soft glow of lights through the window, and her curiosity got the better of her. She stepped closer, peeking through the glass to see what he was up to. What she saw took her breath away. Chris was standing by the Christmas tree, carefully hanging an ornament on one of the branches. The tree was beautiful, its lights twinkling like stars, the ornaments shimmering in the soft glow. But it wasn't just the tree that caught her attention. It was the look on Chris's face, the quiet joy and contentment that radiated from him as he decorated. Carole felt a warmth spread through her chest as she watched him. There was something incredibly touching about the scene. The way Chris moved with such care and attention, as if each ornament he placed held a special significance. It was clear that he was putting his heart into the task, creating something beautiful that would bring joy to his home. Without thinking, Carole reached into her pocket and pulled out a small ornament she had been carrying with her, a tiny silver star that she had planned to hang on her own tree. She hesitated for a moment, but then, with a smile, she quietly opened the front door and slipped inside. Chris was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice Carole at first. She approached the tree slowly, careful not to make a sound, and when she was close enough, she reached out and gently hung the silver star on one of the branches. The soft sound of the ornament settling into place caught Chris's attention, and he turned to see Carole standing beside him, a shy smile on her face. His surprise quickly turned into a smile of his own, and for a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, admiring the tree. Together, Chris and Carole finished decorating the tree, working in harmony as they added the final touches. When they were done, they stepped back to admire their handiwork. The tree was a true work of art, its branches adorned with lights, ornaments, and garlands, each piece contributing to the overall beauty. The room was filled with a warm, golden light, the glow of the tree reflecting off the walls and ceiling, creating a cozy, inviting atmosphere. The scent of pine filled the air, mingling with the soft sounds of Christmas music playing in the background, making the moment feel even more special. Chris reached out and gently took Carole's hand, giving it a soft squeeze. She looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion, and they shared a moment of quiet understanding. No words were needed, their connection was strong, and in that moment, they both knew that this Christmas would be one to remember. As the evening grew late, Chris walked Carole to the door, their hands still clasped together. They stepped outside into the cold night, the stars twinkling overhead and the snow glistening in the moonlight. The world was quiet, as if it too was savoring the beauty of the night. With a final smile, Carole said goodnight and began to walk home, her heart full of warmth and happiness. Chris watched her go, a soft smile on his lips, before closing the door and returning to the cozy warmth of his home. The Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, its lights twinkling softly in the darkness. Chris sat down on the couch, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The evening had been perfect in every way, a reminder of the simple joys that the holiday season could bring. As he sat there, the room illuminated by the soft glow of the tree, Chris couldn't help but think about what the future might hold. The connection he felt with Carole was undeniable, and the thought of spending more time with her, of creating more memories together, filled him with hope and anticipation. The night grew quieter as the hours passed, the world outside blanketed in snow and silence. Chris eventually drifted off to sleep on the couch, the warmth of the evening still lingering in his heart. And as the Christmas tree continued to glow softly in the corner, it seemed to symbolize the beginning of something new, something bright and beautiful that would only grow stronger in the days to come. Chapter 7. The Snowstorm. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with the hustle and bustle of holiday preparations. The town was a picture-perfect winter wonderland, with streets lined with twinkling lights and shop windows adorned with festive displays. The excitement in the air was palpable as everyone eagerly anticipated the holiday celebrations. Chris spent much of his time thinking about Carole and the moments they had shared together. The memory of decorating the Christmas tree with her lingered in his mind, bringing a warmth to his heart that stayed with him throughout the day. He found himself looking forward to the possibility of seeing her again, imagining the joy they could continue to share during the holiday season. One evening, as Chris was finishing up his tasks at work, the first flakes of snow began to fall. The weather forecast had predicted a snowstorm, but no one had anticipated just how quickly the storm would arrive. Within an hour, the town was blanketed in a thick layer of snow, the streets quickly becoming impassable as the storm intensified. Chris decided to leave work early, knowing that the drive home would be treacherous if he waited any longer. He bundled up in his warmest coat, hat, and gloves, and made his way to his car, which was already covered in a layer of snow. The wind howled around him as he cleared the snow from his windshield, the icy flakes stinging his face and hands. The drive home was slow and challenging. The snow fell heavily, obscuring the road and making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The tires of Chris's car struggled to find traction on the slick pavement, and he had to navigate carefully to avoid skidding or getting stuck in the deepening drifts. The once familiar streets of the town had been transformed into a white, swirling landscape, the landmarks and buildings barely recognizable beneath the snow. As Chris inched his way through the storm, his thoughts turned to Carole. He wondered if she was safe and warm at home, or if she was out in the storm, trying to make her way back just as he was. The thought of her being stranded somewhere in the snow filled him with concern, and he resolved to check on her as soon as he made it home. After what felt like an eternity, Chris finally pulled into his driveway. The snow was still falling thick and fast, and the wind whipped around him as he stepped out of the car. He was relieved to be home, but his thoughts were still with Carole. Without hesitating, he grabbed his phone and sent her a message, hoping that she would respond quickly. Minutes passed, and there was no reply. Chris's worry deepened as he stared out the window, watching the snow continue to pile up outside. The streets were empty, the usual sounds of the town muted by the blanket of snow. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the world outside seemed to have been swallowed by the white, swirling chaos. Chris knew he couldn't just sit and wait. The thought of Carole being out in the storm, possibly in need of help, was too much to bear. He quickly bundled up again, pulling on his boots and wrapping a scarf tightly around his neck. Grabbing a flashlight, he headed out into the storm, determined to find her. The snow was deep and difficult to walk through, each step requiring effort as Chris pushed forward. The wind blew fiercely, making it hard to keep his balance, and the cold bit into his skin, seeping through even his thick layers of clothing. But he didn't let the harsh conditions deter him. His concern for Carole was stronger than any discomfort he felt. As Chris made his way through the deserted streets, he called out Carole's name, hoping against hope that she would hear him. The wind carried his voice away, muffling it and making it difficult to tell if anyone was nearby. He kept moving, shining his flashlight into the swirling snow, searching for any sign of her. The town was eerily quiet, the only sound the howling of the wind and the crunch of snow beneath Chris's boots. The storm had transformed the familiar streets into a maze of white, and it was easy to lose one's bearings in the disorienting conditions. But Chris kept his focus, his mind set on finding Carole. After what felt like hours, Chris finally spotted a figure in the distance. The figure was struggling through the snow, moving slowly and unsteadily, as if each step was a battle. Chris's heart leaped with hope as he quickened his pace, his legs burning with the effort of pushing through the drifts. As he drew closer, Chris's flashlight beam fell on the figure's face, and he recognized Carole instantly. She looked up at him, her expression one of exhaustion and relief. Chris could see that she was cold and weary, her clothes dusted with snow, her cheeks red from the biting wind. Without a word, Chris rushed to her side, offering her the warmth of his embrace. Carole leaned into him, grateful for his presence, and together they began the slow journey back to Chris's home. The storm raged around them, but with Chris's arm around her, Carole felt a sense of safety and comfort that gave her the strength to keep going. The walk was arduous, the snow deeper than ever and the wind relentless, but they moved steadily forward, step by step. Chris kept a firm grip on Carole, guiding her through the storm, his determination unwavering. He could feel her shivering against him, and he quickened his pace, knowing that they needed to get out of the cold as soon as possible. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached Chris's home. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the freezing storm outside, and as they stepped through the door, Chris felt a wave of relief wash over him. He quickly helped Carole out of her snow-covered coat and boots, guiding her to the living room where the fire was already crackling in the fireplace. The soft glow of the fire filled the room with warmth, and Chris led Carole to the couch, where she could rest and warm up. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, making sure she was comfortable before going to the kitchen to prepare something warm to drink. The storm continued to howl outside, but inside, there was a sense of peace and safety. Carole watched as Chris moved around the kitchen, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew that without him, she might have been lost in the storm, and the thought of his kindness and concern filled her with a deep sense of affection. She couldn't help but smile as she watched him work, the warmth of the fire and the comfort of his presence making her feel truly at home. When Chris returned with 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa, he sat down beside Carole, handing her one of the mugs. The warmth of the drink seeped through her hands, and as she took a sip, she felt the chill of the storm begin to melt away. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with a gentle, soothing sound, and the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in their cozy sanctuary. As they sat together by the fire, the storm continued to rage outside, but inside, there was a sense of calm and contentment. Chris and Carole didn't need words to express what they were feeling. Their connection was deep and unspoken, a bond that had been strengthened by the storm and the challenges they had faced together. The night stretched on, the snow piling up outside while the fire burned steadily in the hearth. Chris and Carole sat side by side, their shoulders touching, the warmth of the fire and their closeness keeping the cold at bay. The events of the evening had brought them even closer, and as they sat in silence, they both knew that this Christmas would be one they would never forget. The snowstorm eventually began to subside, the wind dying down and the snow falling more gently. The town was buried beneath a thick blanket of white, the streets silent and still, as if the world had been put to sleep. But inside Chris's home, the fire continued to burn brightly, and the warmth of the evening lingered in the air. As the night wore on, Chris gently wrapped his arm around Carole, pulling her closer. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace and contentment that she hadn't felt in a long time. Together, they watched the flames dance in the fireplace, the glow of the fire reflecting in their eyes, a silent promise of the connection they shared. The storm outside might have been fierce, but inside, there was only warmth and love, a feeling that would stay with them long after the snow had melted and the world had returned to its usual rhythm. And as they sat there, side by side, they both knew that this Christmas had brought them something truly special, the beginning of a love that would continue to grow, no matter what storms life might bring. Chapter 8. The Christmas Market. The day after the storm, the town was transformed into a winter wonderland. The heavy snowfall had coated everything in a pristine layer of white, turning the streets into a soft, glittering landscape. Icicles hung from the eaves of houses, and the trees were adorned with thick blankets of snow that sparkled in the sunlight. The air was crisp and cold, but the sky was clear, with the sun casting a golden glow over the town. Chris and Carole woke to the quiet stillness of the morning, the events of the previous night still fresh in their minds. The storm had passed, leaving behind a peaceful calm that seemed to seep into every corner of the town. As they stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered world, they could see that the streets were already being cleared, and the town was beginning to stir back to life. Despite the lingering chill, the day promised to be beautiful. It was the perfect day for the Christmas market, which had been postponed due to the storm. The market was an annual tradition in the town, drawing people from near and far to enjoy the festive atmosphere, shop for handmade gifts, and indulge in seasonal treats. It was a highlight of the holiday season, and Chris and Carole both looked forward to experiencing it together. Bundling up in their warmest clothes, Chris and Carole set out for the market. The streets were bustling with activity as townspeople shoveled snow, hung fresh wreaths on their doors, and greeted each other with cheerful smiles. The air was filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke, and there was a palpable sense of excitement as everyone prepared for the day's festivities. As they approached the town square, Chris and Carole could hear the sounds of the market, a blend of cheerful music, the chatter of vendors, and the laughter of children playing in the snow. The square had been transformed into a festive wonderland, with stalls set up around a large Christmas tree that stood proudly in the center, its branches adorned with twinkling lights and colorful ornaments. The market stalls were filled with an array of goods, from handmade crafts and decorations to local produce and freshly baked treats. The vendors, bundled up in scarves and hats, called out to passers-by, offering samples of their wares and wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. The air was filled with the delicious aromas of spiced cider, roasted chestnuts, and freshly baked gingerbread, tempting everyone to stop and indulge in a taste of the season. Chris and Carole strolled through the market hand in hand, taking in the sights, sounds, and smells of the festive scene. They paused at various stalls, admiring the beautifully crafted ornaments, sampling the warm treats, and picking out a few gifts for each other and their loved ones. The atmosphere was lively and joyful, with families and friends gathering to celebrate the season, their laughter and chatter blending with the music that played softly in the background. At one stall, Chris spotted a delicate snow globe that caught his eye. Inside the glass dome was a miniature scene of the town, complete with tiny, snow-covered houses, a twinkling Christmas tree, and little figures skating on a frozen pond. The craftsmanship was exquisite, and as Chris gently shook the globe, the snowflakes inside danced around the scene, creating a magical, wintry world. Carole smiled as she watched Chris admire the snow globe, her heart warming at the sight. She could see the childlike wonder in his eyes, the same wonder she had felt when she first saw the town covered in snow. Without a word, she knew that this small, simple gift would hold a special place in their home, a reminder of the day they spent together at the market. As they continued to explore the market, Chris and Carole came across a small stage where a group of musicians were playing traditional Christmas carols. The music was cheerful and uplifting, filling the air with the spirit of the season. A crowd had gathered around the stage, clapping along to the tunes and singing softly under their breath. Some children danced in the snow, their cheeks flushed with excitement, while others sat on their parents' shoulders, their eyes wide with wonder. Chris and Carole stood at the edge of the crowd, their hands still intertwined, as they listened to the music. The sound of the carols, combined with the festive atmosphere of the market, filled them with a deep sense of joy and contentment. They exchanged a glance, both of them smiling, knowing that this moment, this simple, shared experience, was what made the holiday season truly special. As the day went on, the market grew busier, with more people arriving to enjoy the festivities. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the square, making the snow glisten like diamonds. The Christmas tree in the center of the square seemed to glow with its own light, its ornaments catching the sun and reflecting it in a kaleidoscope of colors. Chris and Carole spent hours at the market, savoring every moment. They sampled warm cider, nibbled on roasted chestnuts, and shared a gingerbread cookie shaped like a snowman, laughing as they carefully bit off each part. They watched a group of children build a snowman near the edge of the square, the little ones shrieking with delight as they rolled the snow into large, lumpy balls. When the snowman was complete, the children proudly placed a carrot nose and a scarf around its neck, and Chris and Carole couldn't help but smile at the sight. As the afternoon turned to evening, the market took on a new, magical quality. The sun began to set, and the twinkling lights strung across the square became more prominent, casting a soft, warm glow over the stalls and the people milling about. The Christmas tree's lights shone brightly, illuminating the square and adding to the festive atmosphere. Chris and Carole found a quiet spot near the edge of the square, where they could sit and watch the market from a distance. They had bought a few small gifts, including the snow globe that Chris had admired, and they sat together, enjoying the peacefulness of the evening as the last of the daylight faded away. The market was still lively, with families and friends continuing to enjoy the festivities, but there was a sense of calm as well, a collective appreciation for the beauty of the season and the joy of being together. Chris and Carole sat close, their shoulders touching, as they watched the lights twinkle and the snow gently fall around them. As the first stars began to appear in the night sky, Chris and Carole knew that it was time to head home. They gathered their things, taking one last look at the market, before making their way back through the snow-covered streets. The walk home was quiet, the only sounds the crunch of snow beneath their boots and the distant laughter and music from the square. When they arrived back at Chris's home, the warmth of the fire greeted them once again. They set their gifts aside and settled in for the evening, the snow globe taking its place on the mantel, where it would serve as a reminder of the day's simple, joyful moments. As they sat by the fire, Chris and Carole both felt a deep sense of contentment. The Christmas market had been a day of shared experiences, laughter, and warmth, a day that had brought them even closer together. The memories they had made would stay with them, cherished and revisited in the years to come, as a reminder of the love and connection they had found in each other. And as they sat in the quiet of the evening, with the fire crackling softly and the snow globe gently sparkling in the firelight, Chris and Carole knew that this Christmas would be one they would always treasure, a season of love, joy, and togetherness that had only just begun. Chapter 9. The Christmas Eve. The day before Christmas was filled with anticipation and excitement. The town was decked out in its holiday best, with houses and businesses adorned with twinkling lights, garlands, and wreaths. The streets were bustling with last-minute shoppers, each person carrying bags filled with gifts and holiday treats. The air was filled with the cheerful sounds of Christmas music and the aroma of freshly baked goods from the local bakeries. Chris and Carole awoke early on Christmas Eve, the festive atmosphere of the town seeping into their home. They had spent the previous day decorating, and their house was now a cozy haven of holiday cheer. The Christmas tree, adorned with sparkling ornaments and a star on top, stood proudly in the corner of the living room. Stockings hung from the mantel, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. As the sun rose, casting a soft golden light over the snow-covered landscape, Chris and Carole decided to spend the morning preparing for the evening's festivities. They made their way to the kitchen, where they began to prepare a special Christmas Eve dinner. The kitchen was filled with the sounds of chopping, stirring, and the occasional clatter of pots and pans. The aroma of roasting meat and baking bread wafted through the house, creating a sense of warmth and comfort. With the dinner preparations underway, Chris and Carole took a break to enjoy a quiet moment together. They sat by the window, sipping hot cocoa and watching the snow fall gently outside. The world beyond the glass was a winter wonderland, with the snowflakes creating a delicate, shimmering curtain over the town. The scene was peaceful and serene, a perfect backdrop for the day's celebrations. As the afternoon approached, the house was transformed into a festive haven. Chris and Carole set the dining table with care, placing candles, festive napkins, and carefully arranged place settings. The table was adorned with a centerpiece of fresh pine and holly, adding a touch of natural beauty to the holiday decor. They arranged the food on the table, each dish carefully prepared and presented with love. With the table set and the meal ready, Chris and Carole decided to take a stroll through the town to soak in the Christmas Eve atmosphere. They bundled up warmly, donning coats, scarves, and gloves, and stepped out into the crisp, cold air. The streets were alive with activity, the shops and homes illuminated by festive lights and decorations. As they walked hand in hand, Chris and Carole admired the Christmas displays in the shop windows. Each window was a carefully curated scene of holiday magic, with scenes of snowy landscapes, twinkling lights, and festive characters. The shops were bustling with people, each person carrying bags of gifts and treats. The cheerful sounds of Christmas music played in the background, adding to the festive ambience. They strolled through the town square, where a large Christmas tree stood proudly, adorned with lights and ornaments. The tree was surrounded by a small ice rink, where children and adults alike glided gracefully across the ice. The laughter and joy of the skaters filled the air, and Chris and Carole watched with smiles on their faces, enjoying the simple pleasure of the moment. As the evening approached, the town square began to fill with even more activity. Street vendors set up booths selling hot cocoa, roasted chestnuts, and holiday sweets. The air was filled with the scent of spices and baked goods, mingling with the crisp winter air. Chris and Carole decided to indulge in some treats, savoring the warmth of the hot cocoa and the rich flavor of the roasted chestnuts. After their walk through the square, they made their way back to their home, their hearts full of the holiday spirit. The house was warmly lit, the glow of the candles and the twinkling lights creating a cozy, inviting atmosphere. They prepared the final touches for their Christmas Eve dinner, adding finishing touches to the table and arranging the candles for a warm, festive glow. As they sat down to enjoy their meal, Chris and Carole felt a deep sense of contentment. The dinner was a simple, yet elegant affair, filled with the flavors and aromas of the season. They enjoyed each dish, savoring the tastes and the company of one another. The warmth of the fire and the soft glow of the candles created a romantic and intimate setting, perfect for a special Christmas Eve. After dinner, Chris and Carole exchanged gifts. The exchange was a heartfelt moment, filled with smiles and the joy of giving. Chris had chosen a beautiful locket for Carole, engraved with their initials and a tiny photograph of the two of them inside. Carole had selected a warm, woolen scarf for Chris, in a deep, rich color that complemented his eyes. The gifts were simple but meaningful, a reflection of the love and thoughtfulness they shared. With the gifts exchanged and the evening winding down, Chris and Carole decided to take a moment to relax by the fire. They settled on the couch, wrapping themselves in a soft, warm blanket. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm, flickering glow over the room. The snow continued to fall gently outside, creating a serene, peaceful backdrop to their quiet evening. As they sat together, the love and connection between them felt stronger than ever. The events of the past few days had brought them closer, and the magic of Christmas Eve only deepened their bond. They reflected on the joy and warmth they had shared, feeling grateful for each other and the special moments they had experienced. The night grew late, and the house was filled with a sense of calm and contentment. Chris and Carole enjoyed the tranquility of the evening, knowing that Christmas Day was just around the corner. They looked forward to the new day with anticipation, eager to continue celebrating the season together. As they finally retired for the night, they did so with hearts full of love and gratitude. The Christmas Eve had been a perfect prelude to the holiday, filled with joy, warmth, and the special magic of the season. And as they drifted off to sleep, they knew that Christmas Day would bring even more moments to cherish as they continued their journey together, celebrating the love and happiness they had found in each other. Chapter 10. The Christmas Day. Christmas Day arrived with a sense of serene magic that filled the air. The town was still covered in snow, each house and street adorned with festive decorations that glowed softly in the early morning light. The sky was a pale blue, with the sun casting a gentle, warm glow over the snow-covered landscape. It was a perfect Christmas morning, one that promised a day of joy and celebration. Chris and Carole awoke early, the excitement of Christmas Day evident in their bright eyes and eager smiles. The house was filled with the soft, inviting aroma of cinnamon and fresh pine, a reminder of the warmth and comfort of the holiday season. They took a moment to admire their cozy home, with its twinkling lights and festive decorations, before heading downstairs to begin their Christmas Day. The living room was a picture of holiday cheer, with the Christmas tree standing proudly in the corner, its lights twinkling and ornaments shimmering. The stockings hung from the mantel, each one filled with small gifts and treats. The fire crackled gently in the fireplace, adding a warm and comforting glow to the room. Chris and Carole exchanged glances filled with excitement as they approached the tree. The anticipation of opening their Christmas gifts was palpable, and they couldn't wait to see what surprises awaited them. They settled comfortably on the floor, surrounded by the pile of gifts that had accumulated beneath the tree. The morning was spent unwrapping presents, each gift bringing smiles and laughter. Chris had chosen thoughtful presents for Carole, each one carefully selected to reflect her interests and passions. Carole's gifts for Chris were equally meaningful, showcasing her deep understanding of his tastes and preferences. The exchange of gifts was a joyful experience, filled with moments of surprise and appreciation. After the presents had been opened and admired, Chris and Carole decided to take a break and enjoy a leisurely breakfast. They prepared a festive spread, complete with fluffy pancakes, crisp bacon, and fresh fruit. The breakfast table was adorned with a holiday centerpiece, and the soft light of the morning sun made the meal even more special. They savored each bite, enjoying the simple pleasure of sharing a meal together on Christmas morning. With breakfast concluded, Chris and Carole decided to take a walk through the snow-covered town. The fresh air was invigorating, and the snow crunched beneath their boots as they made their way through the streets. The town was quieter than usual, with many people staying indoors to enjoy their own holiday celebrations. The serene atmosphere made their walk even more enjoyable, allowing them to take in the beauty of the season in a peaceful setting. They wandered through the town square, where the Christmas tree still stood, its lights twinkling brightly. The ice rink was empty, a reminder of the festive activity from the previous day. Chris and Carole took a moment to admire the tree, its ornaments and lights reflecting the soft glow of the morning sun. They paused to take in the scene, feeling the warmth and joy of the holiday season surrounding them. As the day continued, Chris and Carole returned home to prepare for their Christmas Day meal. The house was filled with the sounds of cooking and the delightful aromas of holiday dishes. They worked together to create a festive feast, with each dish carefully prepared and lovingly presented. The table was set with care, adorned with a holiday tablecloth, candles, and a beautiful centerpiece. The meal was a celebration of the season, with traditional dishes and seasonal treats making up the menu. As they enjoyed their Christmas dinner, Chris and Carole took time to reflect on the year gone by and the special moments they had shared. The conversation was filled with appreciation and gratitude, their hearts full of the love and connection they had found in each other. After the meal, Chris and Carole decided to spend some time relaxing by the fire. The warmth of the fire and the soft glow of the Christmas lights created a cozy and inviting atmosphere. They sat together on the couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, and took in the peaceful ambience of the room. The snow continued to fall gently outside, adding to the serene beauty of the Christmas day. As evening approached, Chris and Carole decided to take a moment to exchange their heartfelt reflections on the day. They each wrote a letter to the other, expressing their love and appreciation for the special moments they had shared throughout the holiday season. The letters were personal and heartfelt, a testament to the deep bond they had formed. With the letters exchanged and their hearts full of love, Chris and Carole decided to spend the rest of the evening enjoying each other's company. They played games, reminisced about their favorite moments of the holiday season, and simply enjoyed the warmth and comfort of their home. The Christmas day had been a perfect celebration of love, joy, and togetherness, and they cherished every moment. As the night grew late and the fire began to die down, Chris and Carole prepared for bed. They took one last look at the Christmas tree, its lights casting a soft, warm glow over the room. The tree, with its shimmering ornaments and twinkling lights, was a beautiful reminder of the holiday magic they had experienced together. As they settled into bed, Chris and Carole held each other close, their hearts full of love and contentment. The Christmas day had been a perfect culmination of their holiday celebrations, a day filled with joy, warmth, and the special magic of the season. They knew that the memories they had created would stay with them, cherished and revisited in the years to come. And as they drifted off to sleep, the gentle snowfall outside and the soft glow of the Christmas lights created a sense of peace and tranquility. The love and happiness they had found in each other were the true gifts of the season, and they looked forward to continuing their journey together, with the memories of this Christmas day serving as a beautiful reminder of the love they shared.